The jury is set to resume deliberations today in former President Trump's historic hush money trial. Jurors have requested to rehear previous testimony from former Trump attorney Michael Cohen and former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker, as well as the judge's instructions to convict. The jury must find that former President Trump falsified business records to hide a hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels in order to influence the 2016 election. Trump has denied any wrongdoing. ABC News executive editorial producer John Santucci joins me now, along with director of Fordham Law School's Voting Rights and Democracy Project, Jeffrey Goldfeder. John, what's the latest from court?
Well, it's a smaller scene in court. I mean, very few people with Donald Trump this morning. I mean, I spoke to some of the people that were there yesterday, and I think they got a little bored hanging around court all day. So the reality is that they don't have to, but Donald Trump does. So he's with just his son, Eric Trump, and a few small group of aides this morning because, look, the reality is that this is potentially going to be a rather long day. We're waiting for the judge to take his seat on the bench. As we talked about a few minutes ago, Diane, this will begin the readback process, going through those questions the jury had where they want to hear excerpts of testimony from David Pecker and Michael Cohen. So that will take some time to read. And then the other thing that was a bit of a curveball at the end of yesterday, where the jury again asked to hear the charge from the judge, have him go through the law. Now, the question is, and we have it there on screen for our viewers, this is where the judge actually broke down what is at the heart of this case, the falsified invoices, the ledger, the 12 falsified entries there, the checks that were made, which obviously were the hush money payments as a retainer for Michael Cohen, 9 of which, as we know, were directly signed by former President Donald Trump while he was in office. As we saw from that testimony, those checks were mailed down from Trump Tower to the White House. They were signed by Donald Trump, then shipped back up to the Trump Organization, where they were ultimately distributed to Michael Cohen. And we know Donald Trump has obviously prided himself on always signing checks himself. So as some people have interpreted, I know Jerry's had this conversation with us a couple times as well, if there ever was a split verdict, that's one thing that you can't argue, that Donald Trump himself put pen to paper and signed those checks. So we'll wait and see how this goes.
Jerry, generally when a jury gives a note, asks a question, that kind of thing, the attorneys involved try to read the tea leaves a little bit to the best of their ability. So what do you make of the jury's request to rehear testimony from Michael Cohen?
Well, I think they really want to make sure that they are deliberating in a way with the full knowledge of what Michael Cohen has said. After all, they've heard a lot of testimony. It's been going on for weeks. They want to hear some readbacks from Michael Cohen. They want to hear some readbacks from David Pecker, who's the publisher of the National Enquirer. They want to make sure that what David Pecker testified to was similar to, if not the same, as what Michael Cohen testified to. The judge has instructed them that they can't rely only on Michael Cohen because he was an accomplice to this scheme. So they have to make certain that other people testified in the same way as Michael Cohen. So that's why they want to hear the readback from the court reporter of David Pecker and Michael Cohen. I don't necessarily know if that's good for the prosecution or if it's good for the defense. I think what it's good for is that the jury is seriously looking at the evidence because they really want to make sure they get it right.
And what about the request to rehear testimony from David Pecker? The defense, we're hearing from sources, were kind of optimistic when they heard the jury wanted to hear Cohen's testimony again, but less so when they heard the jury wanted to hear Pecker's testimony again.
Well, I think that defense lawyers and prosecutors being optimistic or pessimistic we can't really go by that because we really don't know. I think the long and short of it is that the jury wants to get the full picture. And I'm not sure if it's good for the prosecution or good for the defense. I think we have a serious jury. We've seen that. They've been very alert, taking notes for weeks now, and they have really they are trying to make sure, I think, that they drill down on the evidence, they get a full picture. They want to make sure that what David Pecker has said is similar to what Michael Cohen has said, because they want to get it right. And I think that's really the only takeaway that we can be confident of.
And John, while the jury is deliberating, the judge told all the parties involved yesterday, you can't leave the building and you have to be able to get to the courtroom quickly, because if something happens, if they have a note, a question they want to answer, or a verdict, they want to get to that right away. So what does that mean for former President Trump and his campaign right now?
Stuck. There was a video posted by his son Donald Trump Jr. yesterday. Diet Coke and Milk Duds was clearly the diet of choice. No McDonald's, I suppose, was available. But that's where really it's going to be a struggle for Donald Trump, because we know he gets bored. We understand they finally brought a TV into this holding room where he was able to watch a little bit of cable news coverage of this. Go figure, it was Fox as we understood it. But the reality is that, look, this trial has done one thing to Donald Trump: taken any and all control away from him. He can't leave. He can't, go out to anywhere of his leisure. He has to stay put, because that's where Judge Merchan told him to be. And think about, as we've gone through this trial, right? Any days off they requested, his son's high school graduation, all of it could only happen if he was given permission by Judge Juan Merchan. So I do think that this is where, Donald Trump, if anything, is probably saying the words, hurry up in some ways. Maybe that's not good if you're doing the tea leaf reading, but it's also Donald Trump's biggest thing is get me out of this courthouse, because we know repeatedly he has said it's cold, it's dingy, I don't like it here. I mean, this is not the place Donald Trump wants to be under any normal circumstances.
And Jerry, the jury's also set to rehear those jury instructions that they were given by the judge yesterday. And it was interesting to hear the judge yesterday say that they cannot convict Trump based solely on the word of Michael Cohen, because Michael Cohen is an accomplice to this alleged crime. So even if they believe everything Michael Cohen said, that is not enough, according to these instructions, for the jury to convict. Was there anything else in the instructions that sort of stuck out to you that you think could have a big impact here?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact. So first of all, just so that your viewers understand, they don't have the instructions in the jury room. In some federal courts, jurors are given the instructions. But here, the judge read the instructions, and the jurors had to listen for over an hour and try to take it in. It's not easy. It's legal mumbo jumbo to a lot of jurors. So they really want to hear the instructions again. There's one instruction that's really important, which is, this is about falsifying business records with the intent to commit or conceal another crime, and that other crime is to influence the election by unlawful means. So it needs to be, if he's going to be found guilty, it needs to be unanimous. But the judge also said in his charge that with this other crime, whether it's violation of tax laws or campaign laws or falsifying additional bank records or business records, they don't have to agree unanimously on what that other crime is. They could be split on whether it's tax records or campaign finance violations or whatnot. So they need to have unanimity that he falsified business records to commit or conceal another crime, but they don't have to be unanimous on what that other crime is. That struck me as very interesting, and I think good for the prosecution, because it gives the jurors some real flexibility in understanding the facts and applying the law here.
And John, Trump's campaign has been fundraising off this case throughout. So how do they move forward once this case is over?
Well, they got no other cases going as of this moment in time. I mean, they're waiting on the Supreme Court to rule on special counsel Jack Smith's case. That's the one to overturn the election on the federal level. Fulton County DA's case has basically gone up in smoke. We don't know anything as far as a potential trial on that front. And the documents case, I mean, you've seen all this reporting. There was a great piece in the New York Times over the weekend talking about Judge Eileen Cannon and really how she has slow-rolled this case, maybe to benefit Donald Trump. I mean, who's to say? But, the reality is that that's another one that does not seem to be coming anywhere near a theater that we would be at prior to the election. So really, one of the things that the campaign is preparing for is they've got a campaign. They've actually got to get him back on the road. Donald Trump has not done a lot of events, partly because he's had this bizarre schedule of court only in session Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, so it's made midweek travel or a long weekend travel basically impossible. But they know that this is where they need to come out, moving ahead. A Veep stakes, convention, there's a lot more that they need to focus on outside of this courthouse.